Forget New Year, New You. This season is about slowing down, locking the doors, and cozying up at home with the one you really want to do nothing with. Your dog. After the holiday chaos, those quiet nights with a blanket, a podcast, and your pup feel like the reset you actually need. Ollie helps make those moments easier with fresh protein-packed meals made from real human-grade ingredients, so your dog can enjoy some quality comfort food too. Choose from 5 recipes and get a personalized plan for your dog's needs. Meals arrive perfectly proportioned with a scoop and storage container, so serving is fast and mess-free. And with Ollie's in-app on-demand health screenings, supporting your dog is easy, ensuring more cuddles for many years to come. Visit ollie.com/truecrime and use code TRUECRIME for 60% off your first box.
I don't know about you, but sometimes I need a snack. In between researching and recording these episodes, I tend to get pretty hungry. And now that Lifeway Kefir is a sponsor of this podcast, I can now share with you that these little drinks are my favorite snack. I'd say it's a guilty pleasure, but the great thing about Lifeway Kefir is that there's no guilt involved. Kefir is a creamy and delicious cultured dairy drink that's a healthier, and in my opinion, tastier version of yogurt. It's 99% lactose-free and it contains 12 different probiotics. Look for Lifeway Kefir in the dairy case at your local grocery store and visit lifewaykefir.com for coupons. That's Lifeway, KEFIR.com. Hi. This is Jillian, and you are listening to the Court Junkie podcast. Welcome to this end-of-the-year update episode. Today, I'm going to be touching base with some of the cases I covered in this podcast, as well as taking you behind the scenes of each one. I'll tell you why I chose the cases that I did, and maybe even tell you things that I left out of the original episodes. But first, thank you all so much for supporting this podcast. Those of you who listen, subscribe, leave reviews, share with your friends, donate, you're all just as big a part of this podcast as I am, and I couldn't do it without you. Please consider joining my Facebook group to discuss all of these cases and more. Just go to courtjunkie.com/Facebook. And now, on to the show. As you may recall, in episodes 1 and 2, I covered the case of Melissa Kaluzinski. Melissa is the former daycare worker who's currently sitting in prison after being convicted of murder. Prosecutors say that she intentionally threw a 10-month-old boy to the ground and killed him, and Melissa confessed to it. But that was after 11 hours of interrogation in what she and her attorneys say was a false confession. Renowned attorney and wrongful conviction advocate Kathleen Zellner then picked up the case, and Melissa won an evidentiary hearing for post-conviction relief. The hearings were held in August and September of this year. There were 3 total, and I covered these extensively in the follow-up case update episodes. So first, let's talk about why I decided to cover this case in the first place. Well, there are actually a few reasons. I live about an hour and a half from where this case took place, in Lake County, Illinois. I had first heard about it on 48 Hours in an episode called Blaming Melissa. And when I saw that, I remember having mixed feelings about Melissa's guilt. 48 Hours definitely seemed sympathetic to her, but I wanted to know more. While I absolutely 100% believe in wrongful convictions, I don't just assume that it's a wrongful conviction because somebody tells me that it is, or because the person has people advocating for them. I need more than that. I need to look into it myself. So when the news of Melissa getting an evidentiary hearing hit the local news in June of this year, I decided that I wanted to attend. And at this point, I already knew that I wanted to start this podcast, and so I figured that this would be a great way to kick it off, to do more research on the case and to actually attend these hearings so that I could hear and see the evidence myself firsthand. So I contacted Melissa's aunt, who I found on Facebook. She was excited about the extra coverage for Melissa, and she invited me to meet up with her at the courthouse for Melissa's hearing. When I got there, I recognized her family right away. They were standing in a group just past the security line to get into the courthouse. They looked stressed and nervous. Her aunt, her parents, her sister, and a small gathering of supporters. I'm not going to lie. It was pretty surreal to watch Melissa's family in court and to wonder what it must be like to be in their position, regardless of her guilt or innocence. But to have a loved one sitting in prison for something that you are absolutely convinced that she didn't do. And at the same time, seeing the family members of the little boy, Ben Kingen. Ben's family would enter the courthouse a little after everybody else, but before the hearing started, and they would leave just before it ended for the day. They would noticeably put their heads down during the x-ray testimony. The images of their deceased little boy up on the overhead, obviously too much to bear. It was also surreal to watch somebody that I admire, Kathleen Zellner, in action in court. This wasn't the first case of Kathleen's that I had followed. I first found out who she was from Ryan Ferguson's case. I had firmly believed in Ryan's innocence, and I watched as Kathleen was a pivotal part of Ryan's fight for freedom. Ryan is now out of prison after 10 years, and he even hosts his own TV show about wrongful convictions on MTV. But this would definitely be the first time that I would witness Kathleen in a courtroom, and she didn't disappoint. She was poised and had a voice that was calming yet firm, and she was an effortlessly commanding presence in the courtroom. I didn't include this in the podcast, but here's an example of what I mean. At one point in the hearing, a former deputy coroner was on the stand, testifying on Melissa's behalf. The prosecution was cross-examining him, and I remember thinking to myself that their line of questioning seemed borderline inappropriate. They were asking him about his own state of mental health, and they were sounding accusatory. Kathleen jumped up and asked for a sidebar. The judge, Judge Daniel Shanes, sort of smirked at her, and he told her that that really wasn't necessary because there was no jury in the room, that it was only a hearing. He was without question being condescending towards her. But Kathleen calmly explained that she was aware that there wasn't a jury, but that Illinois has something called HIPAA laws, and that there was a gallery full of spectators and reporters who were watching and listening. Due to the law and the prosecutor's line of questioning, she strongly advised that they all turn off their mics and approach the bench to further discuss the matter. The judge then agreed with her, and they had a private sidebar at the bench. And then afterwards, he sustained her objection. And that wasn't the only time that Kathleen was able to correct the judge or recite laws on cue without ever looking at her notes. Another time, during another cross-examination of one of her witnesses, I observed Kathleen, calmly seated in her chair at the defense table, rubbing her long nails together, and I remember thinking that it reminded me of a cat sharpening its claws before it was about to pounce. As you all know, Melissa's post-conviction relief petition was denied, and immediately afterwards, as we were all leaving the courtroom, Kathleen kept reassuring everyone, saying that she had been down this road so many times and that she wasn't worried. She would now be taking the case out of Lake County, and she said she couldn't wait. It'll probably be quite a while before we get any more updates on Melissa's case. The appeals process can be quite lengthy. It could take months and perhaps not even next year. But in the meantime, there was other interesting news out of Lake County, Illinois this week. I told you in my first episode about this case that there had been 6 overturned convictions in Lake County since 2010. Well, there's about to be a 7th. Lake County State's Attorney Michael Nurheim has said that he will be dismissing the charges against William Carini, a man who was convicted of sexual assault in 1992 and sentenced to 26 years in prison. A woman had been raped at knife point on the shoulder of an expressway near Gurnee, Illinois. Nurheim said forensic evidence from the crime had been retested and found that it did not match Carini. Although Carini will be exonerated from that crime, he likely won't be getting out of prison anytime soon. He's serving a life sentence for the 1983 murders of his uncle and his childhood friend, and the evidence against him in that case seems pretty strong. But still, the fact that authorities in Lake County are adding yet another wrongful conviction to their already growing collection is pretty alarming, and it definitely works in Melissa's favor, if you ask me. In episode 3, I covered the case of Gabriel Johnson, an 8-month-old boy who had been missing since December 2009. Gabriel's mother, Elizabeth, had told Gabriel's father, who she had recently broken up with, that she had killed him. But later, she told police that she had given Gabriel away to a couple that she had met in the park. Sadly, there aren't any updates in this case. Gabriel is still missing. But as for why I decided to cover this one, well, it's another one that I had been following since the very beginning, and I felt like with each twist and turn, it only became more and more baffling. Here you have this girl who did something with her child to make him disappear from everyone's lives who had ever known him. And regardless of what that was, she barely received any kind of punishment. She has now moved on and is married, out there somewhere just living her life. Like I've said many times before, sometimes the system works and sometimes it doesn't. But what other options are there in this case? Prosecutors obviously felt like they couldn't prove that a murder happened, or even that Gabriel was no longer alive. So aside from the custodial interference, unlawful imprisonment, and kidnapping charges, what other choices did they really have? This episode touched a few of my listeners also.
Hey, Julian. This is Brent from Vancouver. I think the podcast that affected me the most is the Gabriel Johnson one. When there's injustices done to kids, I think it affects all of us. We just don't understand. But when those crimes are perpetrated by their parents, it's just, I don't understand it. And I don't think most people do. It's crazy to not know what happened to that poor little boy. I guess we can hope that he's okay, but it doesn't seem like it.
In episode 4, I covered the case of Pravin Varughese, a 19-year-old college student at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. Pravin had been found deceased in the woods in February 2014 after attending a party and then catching a ride home with a 22-year-old local man named Gage. Gage came forward to police after Pravin went missing and before his body was found, and told them that he had gotten into a physical altercation with Pravin while giving him a ride home. He said that he and Pravin had physically fought, and then when a state trooper showed up, Pravin ran off into the woods, and that was the last time Gage had ever seen him. The Jackson County State's attorney concluded that Pravin had gotten lost in the woods and then had died of hypothermia, but a second autopsy showed that there was blunt force trauma. This is another case that isn't too far from where I live in Chicago. Sure, it's a few hours away, but Pravin's death was all over our local news when it happened, and I'll never forget getting a text message from my mother saying, "This sounds suspicious," with a link to the article. So when I started researching cases to cover on this podcast, I decided to revisit this one. As you'll recall, I spoke with 2 people in that episode. One was Monica Zukas, a former radio host and family friend of Pravin's family, and the other was Pravin's mom, Lovely. I came across Monica's coverage of the case on YouTube. She hosted a radio show called Reality Check, and she covered Pravin's case on numerous episodes. She lives close to Carbondale, and not only that, she has developed a very close friendship with Lovely, Pravin's mom. I reached out to her, and then separately to Pravin's mom, and then recorded the episode. Since then, I've kept in touch with both Lovely and Monica, and I spoke with them just last week to get an update on Pravin's case. Before I get to our phone call, I want to point out that Pravin's episode is my most popular episode, and not only that, but a simple Google search of Pravin's name yields tons of results for Reddit threads, message boards, and other random websites. It's a case that definitely has people talking. I think a big part of that is Lovely and Monica themselves, who have been tireless in their efforts to raise awareness about Pravin. After they saw Pravin's injuries for themselves, they knew they had to do something. Since releasing my episode, there has been additional evidence or things that I've come to be aware of that I wanted to talk to Lovely and Monica about. One of those things was the photos of Pravin's injuries. Recently, Monica and Lovely decided to publish pictures of Pravin after his body had been found online. And the obvious injuries you can see on his head are brutal. So, Monica, you recently posted those pictures on your Facebook page, and I have to admit that when I saw them, I was pretty shocked.
Changes everything, doesn't it?
Yes, it really does. Can you tell us a little bit about those photos themselves and what made you decide to release those?
You know, throughout this whole thing, we would ask questions, raise questions, get support for it, but then we'd be like, we think we're at a standstill. And then something else bombshell would happen. And then we'd yes and get a bigger push. And then after a couple months, we'd go, maybe this is as far as we're going to go. And then finally, I had to see the images. And when I saw them and went completely insane, crazy, I was like, no way.
The photos of Pravin's head are the most astonishing, in my opinion. You can not only see extensive bruising on his forehead, but there's even a large noticeable dent there. There's also a photo of bruises on his left leg and what looked to be defensive wounds on one of his arms. They're truly not the type of injuries, especially the ones on his head, that you'd expect to find from somebody who got lost in the woods and then died of hypothermia. The photos are available on Monica's Facebook page, which I'll post the link to in the show notes as well as in our Facebook group. The same photos are what Lovely and Monica took with them to a Carbondale City Council meeting.
I said, we're putting these in front of the mayor and the city council, not because they're going to change their mind or do anything. We know they have to stand by their cops, fine, but they are going to look at these. I printed out 8x10s and shoved them in their face to the point the mayor was very uncomfortable. One of the women was crying and had to excuse herself because of the severity of these images. One man was crying. You could hear a pin drop in there. But we proved our point. Hey, now, and I said, this is what your officers are still saying are no injuries on her son. And hey, not too long after that, buddy, they gave us those records.
After the city council meeting is when Lovely's family finally received the police reports from the investigation, which gave them more insight into how the case was handled and how it may have been mishandled. I received a question from Jason, one of my listeners and Facebook group members, about how far Pravin's body was found from the side of the road where Gage says he last saw him. I asked Monica to clarify that.
Where he was found, where they say they found him, was approximately 4 football fields off that road, 400 yards.
Quite a long walk through some dense forest, right?
Well, and mind you, all of what you see that appear like to be the scratches on his arms, they are from his shoulder basically down to his elbow, all on the outside. Like, how do you spare your face completely? The woods don't stop at your shoulders. And who puts their arms down to their side while they're walking or roaming or across? Like, the more time goes by and the more we find out, I don't know that I believe that's where he was found.
Okay.
And if he was found that deep in the woods, I don't think that I can believe anymore that he got himself to that point.
Right.
Because I have to word this carefully, but we are very certain now those are not Pravin's shoes. So he had no shoes accounted for in the woods, by the woods, anything to do with the woods. So essentially now they're wanting us to believe that he went 400 yards into a very rugged terrain area with no shoes.
Right.
Not even for one step of the way. They're not there. They're gone. His shoes are gone.
As far as updates in the case, it's all a waiting game right now. As I said in Pravin's episode, the case has been turned over to a special prosecutor, a man named David Robinson. And Lovely and Monica think that David has the answers they've been waiting for. And perhaps just as important, Lovely's family is finally being treated with respect.
We are waiting for all his work to be done,
Right.
So it's a long wait. It's a long wait, but I have to say, like Monica said, until we met with him, we had no idea. nobody was telling us anything. And since then, I've been informed of everything, so I know what's going on, so I don't break my head thinking what they are doing. Before we met with Mr. Robinson, I was like, what's the point? Every time I call, they'll say a few more months, few more weeks, and that went on, and I wasn't getting any kind of answers, and there was nothing going for us, But now I know what he's doing, and I mean, I've been informed. That is a peace of mind.
And has he given you any kind of timeline or anything like that? I know these things obviously take time, but has he, kind of given you any kind of estimate or anything?
No. There are many things he's waiting on. That it's something, they have to wait for so many things. So that's right now I cannot really talk about it, but he keeps me informed, and, I mean, anytime I feel like I need to talk to him, I can. That is something.
And that's what I guess
for me.
Yeah, that's the point I wanted to make real quick. David Robinson is a special prosecutor for the state of Illinois. His job is to represent the people and the victims of the state of Illinois. He came in and treated this family with respect, compassion, dignity. And that's all they've ever asked for from day one.
Right.
And that has gone so far. He's told them, I am sorry for your loss. I don't know how anybody else treated you or why they did or didn't do what they should have done, but I'm here to let you know I'm representing Pravin. I'm here to get answers as to what happened to your son. I know you had a good son because I've been up, down, sideways, back and forth in all his stuff. He has access to everything at Pravin's. All of that is what every prosecutor and state's attorney is supposed to do, and that's the attitude that they are supposed to have with victims, not only in our state, but any state. So this guy's just doing his job, but to this family, it seems like he's a miracle because he's just simply being kind and courteous. That's how disgusting and unprofessional they've been treated by the people in Jackson County. Not by the people, but by the authorities, lots of them in Jackson County.
I'll be posting more from my interview with Lovely and Monica in my Facebook discussion group, which you can find at courtjunkie.com/Facebook. They talk about how they got where they are today with the case, how Lovely and her family are doing, and even some strange yet uplifting things that have been happening to them since Pravin's death. Before I continue, I want to take a quick break to talk about my sponsor. This episode of Court Junkie is sponsored by Lifeway Kefir. Did you know that an 8-ounce serving of Lifeway Kefir contains 11 grams of all-natural protein, 12 different probiotics, 30% of your daily calcium requirement, and is 99% lactose-free? It's the perfect snack for rushed mornings that's tasty enough for dessert. Look for Lifeway Kefir in the dairy case at your favorite local store and visit lifewaykefir.com for coupons. That's Lifeway, KEFIR.com. Now, back to the show.
Hi, my name is Jennifer, and I just wanted to let you know that the most interesting case that I think you've covered in your podcast was the Erica Parsons case.
In episode 5, I covered the extremely difficult case of Erica Parsons, a teenager who had never been reported missing by her adoptive parents, Sandy and Casey Parsons. It wasn't until 2 years later, in July 2013, when Erica's adoptive older brother James walked into a police station in North Carolina and told authorities that he hadn't seen Erica in 2 years. He also told police that he suspected that his parents had done something to her. Sandy and Casey made the rounds in the media and told reporters that Erica was fine and that she had gone to live with her biological grandmother, a woman they called Nan, a woman police say didn't exist. Sandy and Casey were arrested and convicted on numerous fraud charges. They had still been accepting government checks for Erica, even though she had been missing for 2 years. The real bombshells, however, came out at their sentencing hearing, when a number of family members testified that Erica had suffered extreme abuse at the hands of not only Sandy and Casey, but other members of the household too. It was horrifying. When considering this episode for my podcast, I figured it was really a no-brainer. First and foremost, Erica was still missing, and if there's anything I can do to help raise more awareness for a missing person, I'm all about it. Erica deserved to be found. And then there are just no words for the story itself. Here you had a set of adoptive parents who never bothered to report that their adopted daughter was no longer with them. Instead, they collected and cashed government checks, and when their son ratted them out to police, they came up with some ridiculous story involving a fictitious person. And what's more, they really expected people to believe them, when pretty much everyone in the world who heard their story was questioning it. And then, at their sentencing, testimony about Erica's abuse was allowed, and the judge essentially threw the book at them, sentencing Casey to 10 years and Sandy to 8. Casey and Sandy are still currently in jail, and when I recorded the episode, that's pretty much where the case stood. Erica was missing, and her adoptive parents were in jail on fraud charges. Those of you who have listened to the majority of Court Junkie episodes know that I like to interview people close to the case whenever possible. And for this one, I decided to reach out to Brooklyn Parsons, one of Erica's adoptive siblings. Brooklyn had been 2 years older than Erica and had lived with her in the home since Erica had been adopted as a baby. Brooklyn was really receptive to talking to me, even though I imagine it was probably the most difficult subject of her life. She wanted to do anything she could to help spread the word about Erica. She told me that she had never really stopped looking for her and that she kept expecting to see Erica pop up on Facebook one day. In my interview with Brooklyn, she told me that she had gone to see her father Sandy in prison and that he had basically alluded to the fact that he knew where Erica was, that she was no longer alive, and that Casey was the person responsible for her death. I was pretty shocked when she told me that, and I felt obligated to share the information with police. So after the interview was over, I forwarded it to the lead detective in the case. I didn't know it at the time, and neither did Brooklyn, but Sandy had already been talking to authorities. A couple days after I released the episode, I got a message on Facebook from a woman who said that she was Erica's biological mother. I had seen interviews Erica's bio mom had done with reporters after her disappearance, and the name was different on this Facebook account, so I was a little skeptical at first. The woman gave me her number and asked me to call her, so I did. Sure enough, it was Erica's biological mom, Carolyn Parsons. She told me that she had listened to the episode, and I'm not going to lie, that made me nervous. Anytime you're poking around in somebody's life and then telling other people about it, you hope you're reporting things accurately. And in this case, the details about what had happened to her biological daughter had been awful. But thankfully, Carolyn thanked me for doing it and told me about what horrible people Casey and Sandy were and the hell that they had put her through after she gave Erica to them for adoption. She said she had figured that Erica would be safe with them. She had no idea at the time just how wrong she was. Carolyn also told me that she had wanted to get Erica back and that she and Casey had actually talked about it and had planned on slowly introducing her back into Erica's life. Only that never happened. We talked on the phone for about 45 minutes. I felt like I had a better understanding of what had happened, from Carolyn's point of view anyway. One thing she told me that I'll probably never forget is that she knew Erica wasn't alive anymore, but that she wasn't ready to accept it yet. Unfortunately, almost exactly a week later, news broke that Erica's body had been found. I first learned about it on Twitter, from someone who had listened to my podcast and then tweeted me the link to the news article saying that she had been found. At that exact moment, I was actually at a screening of a documentary called Southwest of Salem about the San Antonio Four. You may have heard me talk about that in my last Top Cases of 2016 episode, or even in our Court Junkie group on Facebook. Thankfully, it was towards the end of the panel when my phone started vibrating. But I saw the tweet, and I remember feeling almost numb. Even though everyone had already assumed that she was dead, it was still hard to hear. Erica has yet to be laid to rest, and charges for Casey and Sandy are still forthcoming. Or so we hope. I covered the Richardson family murders in episode 6. It was a story that nightmares are made of. Granted, I don't have children yet, but the thought of a 12-year-old girl conspiring and perhaps even masterminding the brutal murders of her entire family is a little difficult to come to terms with. And then to think that just 10 years later, she's free to live a normal life. Just as a quick refresher, a 12-year-old girl from Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada, whom we'll call JR, conspired with her 23-year-old boyfriend to have her family killed. In April 2006, JR's boyfriend, Jeremy Steinke, went to the Richardson family home in the middle of the night and brutally murdered JR's parents, as well as her 8-year-old little brother. At first, police thought that JR, who was missing from the scene when they got there, was missing and that she was perhaps a victim too. But they soon learned that JR was not only a willing participant in the murders, she may have even been the mastermind. JR was convicted but was released from prison after completing a 10-year sentence. She is now free. For this episode, at first I was somewhat stumped as to who I should interview, if anyone. This case had always fascinated me, and so I knew that I wanted to cover it, but if I could get a first-hand account, I felt like I could bring the story more to life. Unfortunately, there were no survivors that I could talk to, and there was no way that I could get in touch with JR, even if I had wanted to. There's been virtually no trace of her anywhere since she's been released. Interviewing police officers is always a long shot, because I find that the majority of them either don't want to speak about the crimes or they're unable to. I found out who the lead investigator was, Brent Secondiak, and I reached out to him to see if he would be willing to talk about what he had experienced. Luckily, Brent was not only up for it, but he told me that he had just recently started speaking out about the case and that he found it to be somewhat therapeutic. After discovering the bodies of JR's parents and little brother, he said the images were difficult to get out of his head. And not only that, but he harbored resentment for JR for years because he felt like she was pure evil. But he has since learned to move on and to not harbor those feelings anymore. This episode itself was hard for me to cover because it's one in which my opinion truly wavers. And judging from all of the feedback, comments, and discussions I've had with my listeners, it seems like a lot of you feel the same way too. For me, our system becomes even more complex when a child is involved. Is the punishment too harsh? Is the rehab not enough? There haven't been any updates to this case, and this is one where I hope there never is. In episode 7, I covered the disappearance of 17-year-old Alexis Murphy, a bright, outgoing, athletic teenager who disappeared from Livingston, Virginia in August 2013. I think this one is a case that will always bother me until her body is discovered. One of those that you Google every so often to see if there's a resolution. And it's not because I disagree with the outcome, because I think her accused and now convicted killer, Randy Taylor, is right where he belongs, but because Alexis deserves to be found. I decided to cover this case because, again, Alexis is still missing, but there was also the element of it being a no-body murder case, which I always find interesting. Researching this case gave me the idea for my Court Junkie briefs, my little mini episodes that cover a singular legal issue. I felt like I could touch on it in Alexis's episode, of course, but I didn't want to stray too far from Alexis's story by making it all about no-body murder cases. So I reached out to a no-body expert, Tad DeBise, who was cool enough to help me out with not only Alexis's episode, but an entire Court Junkie brief on the topic as well. Another reason why I wanted to cover Alexis's case is because of the strength of her family throughout this ordeal. When I read that they had turned down Randy Taylor's offer to tell them where Alexis's body was in exchange for a lighter sentence, that just really touched me and got me thinking about what I would do in that situation. There aren't any updates in Alexis's case, although I wish I had something more positive to tell you. Randy Taylor still sits in his prison cell, sitting on the fact that he knows where Alexis is, and not saying anything. Alexis's aunt told me that she and some other family members were considering going to the prison to see Randy and had tried to appeal to him to tell them where Alexis is. Hopefully, we'll hear something soon. I think most of the comments and feedback I receive are about Episode 8, the Sherry Ray Rasmussen murder. This was the case of the LAPD officer who was arrested and convicted of a cold case involving her ex-lover's new wife. The case took place in Los Angeles back in 1986. 29-year-old newlywed Sherry Ray Rasmussen was attacked and shot to death in her home. The case went unsolved for decades, with investigators convinced that it had been a burglary gone wrong. But then, in 2009, everything changed when the case was reopened and veteran LAPD officer Stephanie Lazarus became suspect number 1. Stephanie's interrogation with her fellow officers was super interesting to listen to, mostly because she came off as very cocky, as she claimed numerous times that she didn't remember details because it happened a million years ago. Here's another voicemail I received from another one of my listeners.
Hi, my name's Melanie. I think my favorite episode so far of the Court Junkie podcast was the Sherry Ray Rasmussen case. It really boggled my mind that Stephanie Lazarus was a cop for all those years and got caught like that.
It's scary to think that a law enforcement officer could be a premeditated killer and then continue to move up the ranks of the department like that, huh? Episode 9 was about the murder of 29-year-old Ryan Poston and the trial of his ex-girlfriend, Shayna Hubers. This case had a lot of parallels to the Jodi Arias case, in my opinion, a seemingly obsessed ex-girlfriend who kills her ex in a fit of rage. Shayna claimed that Ryan was abusive and that she had shot him in self-defense, but the jury didn't buy that, and they sentenced her to 40 years in prison. But the story doesn't end there. Everything changed when Shayna's defense team discovered that one of the jurors had actually been a convicted felon. In Kentucky, where this case took place, you cannot serve on a jury if you're a convicted felon. So as a result, Shayna gets a new trial next year. In my opinion, the evidence against Shayna is more than I've seen in a lot of other cases, so I don't necessarily think that this is going to work out any better for her. But for Ryan's family, it's traumatic. Having to relive all of the evidence and facts of the case again has got to be heartbreaking. But the law is the law, and Shayna deserves all the rights that are afforded to her, even if the majority of us think she's guilty as sin. Aside from the new trial, the only other news on this case has been that the TV show Snapped on Oxygen did an episode on Shayna this December. Episode 10 was one of my favorite episodes. Not because I love the subject matter, but because to me, it was inspiring in a number of ways. Episode 10 involved Christine Bunch's story, and quite a story it is. Christine was 21 years old in 1995, living in a mobile home in Greensburg, Indiana, with her 3-year-old son, Tony. Christine was awoken in the early morning hours to a fire engulfing their home. She was able to escape, but unable to get to Tony, who ended up dying in the fire. As if losing her son, her home, everything wasn't bad enough, Christine was immediately suspected by police of having started the fire herself. But they had no motive, and it would later turn out that they had no real evidence either. Evidence that hadn't been altered or lied about, that is. Christine was tried and convicted of murder and arson. She was sentenced to 60 years in prison, and she served about 17 until she was finally exonerated in 2012. The details of Christine's story are nothing short of horrifying. But what stands out above all of these horrible facts are Christine's resilience, strength, and grace in which she handled herself and her ordeal. I first read about Christine's case while looking through wrongful convictions cases, and hers immediately stood out to me. I knew how affected that I was when I read about her, and so I knew that I wanted to share what happened to her with as many people as I could. It's hard to explain, but I felt like the details of what happened to her needed to be shared, and that Christine herself needed to be heard. I contacted Christine and pitched her my idea for the episode. She told me that it was really hard for her to talk about everything, but that she felt like it was really important to talk about. I think I said in the beginning of that episode that I wanted people to know that this sort of thing can happen to them. I wanted to really drill that home, so I decided to open the episode with a close your eyes and imagine scenario. I was hoping that it would help to imagine that this had actually happened to you, and that it wasn't just one of those things that you heard about that had happened to somebody else. To be wrongfully convicted is something that I think none of us will ever truly understand unless it happens to us, and hopefully it won't. I can only imagine how frustrating and heartbreaking it would be to be imprisoned for something you knew that you didn't do, and then to have no one believe you, no one who's in a position to help you believe you anyway. I've gotten a lot of really great feedback from Christine's episodes, and Christine herself even joined my Facebook group and has been talking to the members there. Christine and another exoneree, Juan Rivera, who also happens to be one of those exonerees from Lake County that I mentioned earlier, are joining forces to create a nonprofit organization for exonerees. As you know, if you listen to the episodes, oftentimes exonerees are let out of prison, but they have very little help with getting their lives back together, sometimes even less so than if they had actually been guilty of a crime and then had been paroled. It's a part of our system that undoubtedly needs reform, but until then, Christine and Juan want to help. They're forming an organization called Just Is for Just Us, which is a program for exonerees by exonerees. They're still in the process of getting everything together, but I'll post more about it, or I'll ask Christine to, in the Facebook group when it's up and running. That brings me to episode 11, my final regular episode of the year. I covered the sad case of John and Barbara Wise. 66-year-old John had gone to visit Barbara, his ailing wife of 45 years, in the hospital. She had suffered a triple aneurysm and was in intensive care. John walked into the hospital in August 2012 and shot and killed Barbara. When talking to police afterwards, John told them that he and his wife had a pact to never let them grow so old and sick that they couldn't take care of themselves. He said that she was in pain and he couldn't stand to see her like that. He said he was essentially ending her misery. John's trial was an emotional one, even for prosecutors. After he was convicted of murder, prosecutors appealed to the judge to have leniency on him, which the judge agreed to. John was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but he wouldn't make it past the first year. John died of cardiac arrest while in prison, or as his lawyer put it, he died of a broken heart. There aren't any updates in this case, and I don't think there ever will be. Barbara and John are now both deceased, and their families are hopefully able to move on in a way. But as for why I decided to cover it, I thought it was a touching and thought-provoking case. And when I recorded it, I was hoping that you would all feel the same. started this podcast in August of this year, and I've been so overwhelmed, thankful, and completely ecstatic at the responses that I've gotten so far. Every single one of you who reaches out to me, whether it's via email, Twitter, or Facebook, I can't stress enough that I love hearing from you. As the saying goes, I think I found my people. In all seriousness, though, a heartfelt thank you to all of you. I want to talk about what you can expect from this podcast in 2017, or rather, what I hope to accomplish. First and foremost, I'm going to continue releasing regular episodes. I try to release them weekly, and lately, knock on wood, I've been pretty consistent. I also plan on doing more interviews, covering more topics, and attending more trials. One of my goals is to actually attend more hearings and trials so that I can see firsthand what's going on with the case and then report back to you all. I plan on releasing Court Junkie merch for anybody interested in supporting the podcast that way. And I'm also planning on hopefully getting additional advertisers, which I know isn't always a plus for podcast listeners. But in order to keep doing this show and in order to do all that I had planned for it, I do need the support of advertisers. If you absolutely despise hearing the ads, however, I did start posting ad-free episodes on Patreon, where you can donate as little as $1 a month to get access to those. I'll also have some additional perks coming to Patreon too, so be on the lookout. Just go to courtjunkie.com/support. Lastly, I have some other podcasts I want to thank too. About a month or so after starting Court Junkie, I received a message on Twitter from a woman named Brooke, who works with the Unsolved podcast. She told me that there was a group of true crime women podcasters, and she asked me if I was interested in joining. I had no idea what to expect. I honestly didn't even realize how many women were involved in true crime podcasts. But this group of women are the most supportive and wonderful group. And not only that, but they're extraordinarily talented too. And I want to give them all a mention so that you can check them out and add them to your playlists. So if you're interested in missing persons cases, there's Thin Air and The Vanished. If you're interested in true crime podcasts that feature more than one person discussing the different aspects of cases, there's Insight, White Wine True Crime, Slaughter, and Curiosity Kills. For true crimes in specific destinations, check out Bay Area Mystery Club, Twisted Philly, True Crime Asia, and They Walk Among Us, which is about crime in the UK. For fascinating true crime stories, there's Unsolved Podcast, The Apex and the Abyss, Once Upon a Crime, and Already Gone. For podcasts about Supreme Court cases and wrongful convictions, there's Crime and Precedence and Actual Innocence. And for a podcast discussing other podcasts, check out Ex Post Podcast. And lastly, for historical crime, try Most Foully Murdered. I bet you didn't realize that there were so many true crime women podcasters either. That's all for today's episode. Have a great new year, everyone, and until next time.